The bitter cold of the Montana winter sliced through Annabelle O'Connor's tattered coat as she stumbled through knee-deep snow, clutching her twin babies to her chest. Her fingers had gone numb hours ago, but she dared not loosen her grip on the small bundles wrapped in the only blanket she'd managed to grab before fleeing. Behind her lay everything she'd once called home, now nothing more than ashes and painful memories. Tucker Northrop pulled his hat lower against the biting wind as his horse trudged through the snow-covered trail. The setting sun cast long shadows across the pristine white landscape, and he knew he needed to make it back to his cabin before dark. He'd spent the day searching for stray cattle that had wandered during the blizzard that had hit 3 days prior. The winter of 1879 was proving to be one of the harshest he'd experienced in his 10 years ranching in Montana territory. As he rounded a bend in the trail, something caught his eye, a dark shape against the snow, moving slowly. At first he thought it might be a wounded deer or perhaps a wolf, but as he drew closer he realized it was a person. A woman, by the looks of it, hunched over and struggling with each step. "Hello there," he called, spurring his horse forward. "Are you all right, madam?" When she turned toward him, the fear in her eyes struck him first, followed by the realization that she was holding not one but 2 small bundles against her chest. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the whistling wind. Her lips were blue with cold. "Please help us." Before she could say another word, her knees buckled and she began to collapse. Tucker slid from his saddle and lunged forward, catching her just before she hit the ground. The bundles she'd been clutching so desperately began to cry twins, both red-faced and squalling against the cold. "I've got you," he said, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. Her eyes had rolled back and her skin was deathly pale. "I've got all of you." With careful movements, Tucker secured the twins inside his coat, their tiny bodies pressed against his chest for warmth. Then he lifted the unconscious woman onto his horse before mounting behind her. He held her firmly with one arm while the other kept the babies secure. "Come on, Scout," he urged his horse. "Let's get them home." The 15-minute ride to his cabin felt like hours. By the time the small wooden structure came into view, the woman was shivering violently in his arms, a good sign, he hoped, that her body was fighting to warm itself. Tucker's cabin was modest but sturdy, built with his own hands 5 years ago when he decided to stake his claim in this remote part of Montana. A small barn stood nearby where he kept his horses and a milk cow. Inside, he quickly laid the woman on his bed and built up the fire until it roared in the stone hearth. The twins had quieted somewhat, but now began to fuss again as he unwrapped them from their thin blanket. They couldn't have been more than a few months old, a boy and a girl with matching wisps of dark hair and round, pink cheeks. "You're safe now," Tucker murmured as he wrapped them in his warmest blanket and placed them close to the fire, but not too close. Then he turned his attention to their mother. Her clothes were soaked through from the snow. With clinical efficiency, he removed her wet outer garments and wrapped her in the quilts from his bed. Only when she was settled did he take a moment to really look at her. Despite the pallor of cold, she was young, perhaps 25, with auburn hair that tumbled past her shoulders. There was a nasty bruise forming on her left cheek, and her hands were raw and cracked from exposure. While she slept, Tucker prepared a bottle of warmed cow's milk for each of the babies, using the supplies he kept for when his sister visited with her own little ones. The twins accepted the bottles greedily, their tiny hands reaching up to grasp at the glass. "You two were mighty hungry, weren't you?" Tucker said softly, a smile tugging at his lips despite the gravity of the situation. "Wonder what your names are." The cabin filled with the soft sounds of suckling and the crackle of the fire. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, but inside it was warm and safe. Tucker found himself studying the faces of the twins, marveling at their identical button noses and delicate fingers. It was nearly midnight when the woman stirred, a soft moan escaping her lips as her eyes fluttered open. She immediately tried to sit up, panic evident on her face. My babies, she gasped. They're right here, Tucker said quickly, gesturing to where the twins were sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle he'd fashioned from a drawer padded with blankets. They're fine. I gave them some milk and they've been sleeping for a couple of hours now. She stared at him, wary and confused. Who are you? Where am I? My name's Tucker Northrop. I found you and your little ones about to freeze to death out on the trail. This is my cabin about 15 miles northeast of Fort Benton. He poured a cup of hot coffee from the pot, keeping warm on the stove. Here, drink this, it'll help. Her hands trembled as she accepted the cup. After a cautious sip, she closed her eyes, savoring the warmth. Thank you, she said finally. I'm Annabelle O'Connor. The twins are Emma and Ethan. She glanced toward them, her eyes softening. They're 5 months old. What were you doing out there in that cold, Mrs. O'Connor, if you don't mind my asking? Miss, she corrected automatically, and I was running. Her voice hardened. Running from a man who would have killed us all if I'd stayed. Tucker nodded slowly, choosing not to press for details just yet. Well, you're safe here, all 3 of you. You can stay until you're well enough to travel or longer if need be. Why would you do that? You don't know me. Out here, people help each other. It's how we survive. He shrugged. Besides, I couldn't very well leave you and these little ones to freeze, could I? For the first time, a ghost of a smile touched her lips. No, I suppose not. Get some rest. We can talk more in the morning. Tucker made a pallet for himself near the fire and tried to sleep, but found himself listening to the soft breathing of the 3 unexpected guests who had suddenly transformed his solitary existence. Something protective stirred in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Tucker rose before the sun, as was his habit, and went out to tend to his animals. When he returned, he found Annabelle sitting up in bed, one twin cradled in each arm as she softly sang to them. Good morning, he said, stomping the snow from his boots. How are you feeling? Better, she admitted, though I think my feet might be frostbitten. Tucker nodded grimly. Let me have a look. Her feet were indeed showing signs of mild frostbite, reddened and swollen, with a few blisters forming. Tucker treated them as best he could, applying a salve his mother had taught him to make from herbs and bear fat. You should stay off these for a few days, he advised. Let them heal. I can't impose on you like that, Annabelle protested, though he could see the relief in her eyes at not having to move again so soon. It's no imposition. Truth be told, it's nice having some company besides my horse. He smiled, and after a moment she returned it. Over breakfast hot porridge sweetened with the last of his honey, Tucker finally asked the question that had been on his mind since the night before. Who are you running from, Annabelle? She stared into her bowl for a long moment. My stepfather, Victor Holloway. He's a powerful man and Helena owns half the mines and most of the officials. Her voice was flat, as though she'd numbed herself to the emotions behind the words. My mother died last year giving birth to his child. The baby died too. After that he changed. Tucker waited, giving her the space to continue at her own pace. He decided I should take my mother's place in every way. Her knuckles whitened around her spoon. When I refused, he locked me in my room for weeks. I'd still be there if not for a kitchen maid who took pity on me. And the twins. They're my sister's children. She died of typhoid 3 months after they were born. Their father was killed in a mining accident before they were even born. Tears welled in her eyes. They have no one but me now and Victor. He said they were a burden. That he'd send them to an orphanage once he and I were married. I couldn't let that happen. So you ran. She nodded. I took what little money I had saved, some clothes for the babies, and left in the night. We were making our way to my aunt in Oregon when our stagecoach was robbed 2 days ago. The driver was killed and the other passengers scattered. The robbers took everything, my money, our food, even my good boots. I've been walking ever since, trying to reach the next town. Tucker's jaw clenched at the thought of what she'd endured. Well, you're safe here. Holloway won't find you on my land. You don't know him. He has men everywhere and he won't stop looking. Then we'll just have to be careful. Tucker stood and began clearing the dishes. For now, focus on healing those feet. I'll ride into town tomorrow for supplies. I imagine these little ones need proper baby things. I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I'm offering. His tone was firm but gentle. Consider it a loan if that makes you feel better. You can repay me when you're back on your feet, literally. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Tucker would wake early to tend to his livestock, then come in to help with the twins while Annabelle prepared breakfast. Her feet were healing, but slowly, and she still couldn't walk more than a few steps without pain. Tucker found himself enchanted by the twins. Ethan was serious and watchful, his dark eyes following Tucker's movements around the cabin. Emma was more animated, quick to smile and reach for his beard with her tiny fingers. He'd never spent much time around babies before, but he found he had a natural instinct for caring for them. "You're good with them," Annabelle commented one afternoon as she watched Tucker rock Emma to sleep. "Have you ever thought of having children of your own?" Tucker glanced up, a sad smile crossing his face. "Once, a long time ago. What happened? War happened. I came back from fighting for the Union to find my fiancé had married someone else, someone who hadn't gone off to kill other Americans." Annabelle's eyes softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry." Tucker shrugged. "It was for the best. I wasn't the same man who left. Doubt I would have made her happy." "Is that why you live all the way out here, alone?" "Partly. Also because the land is good and I like the quiet." He laid the now sleeping Emma in the drawer cradle beside her brother. "What about you? Before all this happened, what was your dream?" Annabelle looked surprised by the question, as though no one had ever asked her that before. "I wanted to be a teacher," she said finally. "I love books and learning. I used to teach the children of our household staff when my stepfather wasn't looking." "That's a fine dream," Tucker said. "One worth holding on to." That night, as they sat by the fire after the twins had fallen asleep, Annabelle asked Tucker about his ranch. His eyes lit up as he described his small herd of cattle and the horses he was breeding, sturdy Montana stock that could withstand the harsh winters. "It's not much compared to some spreads," he admitted, "but it's mine, free and clear." "It sounds wonderful," she said, and he could hear the genuine admiration in her voice. "To build something like that with your own hands, to be so independent, it's a good life, but a hard one." He stoked the fire, sending sparks up the chimney. "Lonely too, sometimes." Their eyes met across the flames, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of shared loneliness, perhaps, or a recognition of something that might grow, given time and care. The moment was broken by a soft cry from one of the twins. Annabelle started to rise, wincing as she put weight on her feet. "Let me," Tucker said, already moving toward the makeshift cradle. "You rest." As he lifted Ethan and gently patted his back to soothe him, Tucker caught Annabelle watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. But it made his heart beat a little faster all the same. True to his word, Tucker rode into Fort Benton the next day for supplies. The small frontier town was bustling despite the cold, with trappers, traders, and settlers going about their business. He purchased everything he could think of that Annabelle, and the twins might need diapers, baby clothes, a proper cradle that could be shared by the twins, medicines, and food supplies to last several weeks. At the general store, he hesitated before the shelf of women's items, then selected a warm shawl, a pair of sturdy boots that he hoped would fit Annabelle, and a simple dress to replace her tattered one. On impulse, he added a book of poetry he spotted near the register, something to feed that love of books she'd mentioned. As he was loading his purchases onto his packhorse, a flyer tacked to the post office wall caught his eye. It was a wanted notice not for a criminal, but for information leading to the whereabouts of one Annabelle O'Connor and 2 infant children, last seen near Helena. The reward offered was substantial $500. Tucker's blood ran cold as he read the description of Annabelle and the twins. The notice claimed she was mentally unstable and had kidnapped the children, who were actually her stepfather's wards. It urged anyone with information to contact Victor Holloway or the sheriff in Helena. Tucker tore the notice down and crumpled it into his pocket. He needed to warn Annabelle Holloway was indeed looking for her, and he was spreading lies to ensure cooperation from law enforcement and civilians alike. On the ride home, Tucker's mind raced with possibilities. They couldn't stay at his cabin indefinitely. Eventually, someone would make the connection, especially if Holloway's men expanded their search to include Fort Benton. But Annabelle's feet weren't healed enough for travel yet, and even if they were, where would they go? By the time his cabin came into view, Tucker had made a decision. It wasn't perfect, and Annabelle might not agree to it, but it was the best protection he could offer her and the twins. Annabelle greeted him at the door, her face lighting up at the sight of all he'd brought. Her delight at the new books and clothing quickly turned to concern, however, when she saw his serious expression. "What is it?" she asked, once the twins were napping and they could speak freely. "What happened in town?" Tucker pulled the crumpled wanted notice from his pocket and handed it to her. Annabelle's face paled as she read it. "He's calling me insane," she whispered. "And claiming the twins are his wards. That's absurd. He wanted nothing to do with them." "People will believe it because he's powerful and you're not," Tucker said bluntly. "And $500 is enough to turn almost anyone into an informant." "We have to leave," Annabelle said immediately, trying to stand despite her still healing feet. "I've put you in danger just by being here. If Holloway finds out you've helped me, sit down before you hurt yourself," Tucker said firmly. "Nobody's leaving tonight. We need a plan." "What kind of plan could possibly protect us from him?" Her voice cracked with desperation. "He'll never stop looking." "Maybe not," Tucker agreed. "But he's looking for Annabelle O'Connor, a single woman traveling alone with twin babies." He took a deep breath. What if he was looking for Mrs. Tucker Northrop instead, a respectable rancher's wife with her husband's children? Annabelle stared at him, her eyes wide. "Are you proposing marriage?" "A marriage of convenience," Tucker clarified, though something in his chest tightened at having to specify that. "On paper, at least. It would give you and the twins my name and my protection. Legally, Holloway would have no claim on any of you." "But you barely know me," Annabelle protested. "Why would you do this?" Tucker considered his words carefully. "Because I've seen how you love those children, how you risked everything to keep them safe. That kind of courage deserves support." He paused. "And because I've grown fond of all three of you more than I expected to." Annabelle's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it. That's all I'm asking for now," she nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." That night, Tucker lay awake long after Annabelle and the twins had fallen asleep. He'd told her the marriage would be one of convenience, but he wasn't sure that was entirely true, at least not for him. In just a few short days, Annabelle had awakened feelings he'd thought long dead. Her strength, her gentleness with the twins, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, all of it had worked its way under his skin in a way he hadn't experienced in years. And the twins? God help him, he already loved those babies as if they were his own. The thought of them being taken away by a man like Holloway made his blood boil. Morning came with a fresh dusting of snow and a decision from Annabelle. "Yes," she said simply, as Tucker poured his morning coffee. "I accept your proposal." Tucker nearly spilled the coffee in surprise. "You're sure?" "No," she admitted with a small laugh. "I'm terrified, actually, but I trust you, Tucker, and I believe you when you say this is the best way to protect Emma and Ethan." He set down the coffee pot and took her hand. "I promise I'll be a good husband to you, Annabelle. And a good father to the twins. You'll want for nothing I can provide." "I know." Her eyes met his, clear and direct. "But there needs to be honesty between us. I'm not ready for a real marriage, not yet, not after everything with Victor." Tucker nodded, understanding her meaning. "I would never expect anything from you that you're not ready to give. We'll share this cabin as partners and friends. Anything more than that, well, that would be up to you and only if you ever want it." Relief softened her features. "Thank you." "There's a circuit preacher who comes through Fort Benton every few weeks," Tucker said. "He should be due in the next few days. We can be married then, and I'll register the marriage with the county clerk." What about the twins? Will people believe they're yours? Tucker smiled. They're young enough that most folks won't question it, and those who do can mind their own business. As far as anyone needs to know, you're my wife who's been living with relatives back east until our home was ready, and now you've come to join me with our children. The plan set, they spent the next few days preparing. Tucker built a proper cradle for the twins and cleared space in his small cabin for Annabelle's things. Annabelle, whose feet were finally healing enough for her to walk short distances, took over the cooking and taught Tucker how to properly wash and fold the tiny clothes the twins seemed to soil with impressive frequency. In the evenings, they talked learning each other's histories, preferences, and dreams. Tucker told Annabelle about his childhood in Pennsylvania, his 3 years fighting in the Civil War, and his decision to head west afterward to start fresh. Annabelle shared stories of her mother and sister, her love of literature, and her hope to someday open a small school. 3 days later, Tucker rode into town and returned with news that the circuit preacher had arrived. They would be married the following day. That night, as they sat by the fire after the twins were asleep, a nervous tension filled the cabin. "Are you having second thoughts?" Tucker asked, noticing how Annabelle kept twisting a loose thread from her shawl. "No," she said quickly. "It's just, tomorrow I'll be a wife." "I never thought I'd marry this way." Tucker felt a pang of guilt. "I'm sorry it can't be the wedding you dreamed of." "Don't be," she smiled softly. "My dream wedding would have included a man who respects me and cares for the twins. You've already provided that." Her words warmed him more than the fire. Still, every bride should have something special on her wedding day. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It's not much, but I thought you might like it." Annabelle unwrapped the package carefully. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. "Tucker, it's beautiful," she breathed, opening it to find it empty inside. "But when did you?" "I may have made a second trip to town while you were napping yesterday," he admitted. "I thought maybe someday we could put tiny portraits of the twins inside." Tears welled in Annabelle's eyes as she fastened the locket around her neck. "Thank you, it's perfect." On impulse, Tucker reached out and brushed a tear from her cheek. The touch lingered, neither of them pulling away. For a breathless moment, Tucker thought he might wanted to kiss her, but then one of the twins let out a small cry and the moment passed. "I should check on them," Annabelle said, her voice slightly breathless. Tucker nodded, watching her go to the twins. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow she would be his wife, at least in name. And perhaps, someday, in more than that. The wedding itself was a simple affair in the small church in Fort Benton. The preacher, a kind-faced man named Reverend Johnson, asked few questions beyond the basics needed for the marriage certificate. 2 locals served as witnesses, the general store owner and his wife, who cooed over the twins and congratulated the couple warmly. Annabelle wore the new dress Tucker had bought her and the silver locket. Her auburn hair was neatly braided and pinned, and despite the circumstances, she had a genuine smile as she spoke her vows. Tucker, in his best shirt with his beard freshly trimmed, felt a surge of protectiveness and something deeper as he promised to love, honor, and cherish her. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Tucker hesitated only briefly before leaning down to place a gentle, chaste kiss on Annabelle's lips. It lasted only a moment, but he felt it down to his bones. Afterward, Tucker registered their marriage with the county clerk, officially making Annabelle and the twins Northrops. He took special care to have the clerk note that Emma and Ethan were his children, born to his wife Annabelle O'Connor Northrop. The paperwork would make it nearly impossible for Holloway to claim any legal right to the twins or to Annabelle. On the ride home, with Annabelle holding the twins secure in a special carrier Tucker had fashioned for his packhorse, a comfortable silence settled between them. They were married now, partners in a venture neither had anticipated but both had chosen. "Mrs. Northrop," Tucker said as they approached the cabin, testing the sound of it. "Welcome home." Annabelle's smile was bright enough to rival the winter sun reflecting off the snow. "Thank you, Mr. Northrop." That evening, after settling the twins, they shared a special wedding supper. Tucker had arranged roast venison, potatoes, and even a small cake the storekeeper's wife had insisted on sending with them. Tucker had splurged on a bottle of wine as well, and they toasted their new beginning. Later, the question of sleeping arrangements arose. Until now, Annabelle had taken Tucker's bed while he slept on a pallet near the fire, but that seemed inappropriate for a wedding night, even one in name only. "I can continue on the pallet," Tucker offered, seeing Annabelle's discomfort. "That doesn't seem right," she said. "It's your bed." "It's our bed now," he corrected gently. "But I meant what I said before. I expect nothing from this marriage that you're not ready to give." After a moment's consideration, Annabelle proposed a compromise. "The bed is large enough for both of us, especially if we stay on our own sides. We're married now, after all. There's nothing improper about sharing a bed." Tucker agreed, though he wondered if either of them would sleep well with the other so near. His concern proved warranted. He lay awake for hours, acutely aware of Annabelle's presence just inches away, the soft sound of her breathing, the faint scent of her hair. When he finally drifted off, it was to dream of a future where the line down the middle of the bed was forgotten, and the marriage of convenience had become something much more real. The weeks that followed settled into a new routine. Tucker continued his ranch work, while Annabelle managed the household and cared for the twins. As her feet fully healed, she began joining Tucker for some of the easier outdoor chores, proving herself remarkably capable despite her city upbringing. My real father, had a small farm before he died," she explained when Tucker commented on her skill with the animals. "I was only 12 when we lost him, but I remember helping him with the chickens and the vegetable garden." Tucker found himself increasingly drawn to her quiet strength, her gentle way with the twins, the intelligence that shone in her eyes when they discussed books in the evenings. He kept his promise not to pressure her, but sometimes he caught her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, with an expression that gave him hope. Spring came early that year, bringing with it new calves, wildflowers, and a letter from Tucker's sister Martha, who lived in Bozeman with her husband and 3 children. Tucker had written to her shortly after the wedding, explaining his sudden marriage in terms vague enough not to raise suspicion, should the letter fall into the wrong hands. Martha's reply was enthusiastic. She was delighted that her brother had finally found someone and insisted that she and her husband would visit in the summer to meet her new sister-in-law and niece and nephew. "Is that all right?" Tucker asked Annabelle after showing her the letter. "I can put them off if you're not comfortable with visitors yet," Annabelle smiled. "I'd like to meet your sister, and it might be good for the twins to spend time with other children." It was these small moments of normal family life that began to blur the line between their arrangement and a real marriage. Tucker found himself touching Annabelle more frequently, a hand at the small of her back as they moved around the kitchen, fingers brushing as they passed the twins between them, a gentle squeeze of her shoulder when she looked tired. Annabelle, for her part, began to lean into these touches rather than stiffen as she had in the early days. And though they still maintained their respective sides of the bed, Tucker sometimes woke to find her curled toward him in sleep, her hand outstretched across the invisible line that divided them. One evening in late April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while the twins dozed in their shared cradle, Annabelle broke a comfortable silence. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I didn't expect to, but I am." Tucker's heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. He turned to look at her, finding her cheeks flushed but her gaze steady. "I've been in love with you since the day you agreed to marry me," he admitted, "maybe even before that. Really, really." He reached for her hand, and she laced her fingers through his. "I didn't want to rush you or make you feel obligated. This arrangement was supposed to be for your protection, not my happiness." "What if it could be both?" Annabelle asked, her voice soft but sure. What if we stopped pretending this is just an arrangement and acknowledged what it's becoming? Tucker lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Nothing would make me happier, Annabelle. That night, for the first time, they crossed the invisible line down the middle of the bed. Tucker held Annabelle close, her head resting on his chest, her hair spilling across the pillow like a river of copper in the moonlight. They spoke in whispers of their growing feelings, the future they hoped to build, and the family they had unexpectedly formed. When Tucker finally kissed her, really kissed her, not the chaste peck of their wedding day, it felt like coming home after a very long journey. Summer arrived with long, warm days filled with ranch work and family life. The twins, now 10 months old, were crawling everywhere, keeping both Tucker and Annabelle constantly on their toes. Ethan had Tucker's serious demeanor but was quick to laugh at his sister's antics. Emma was fearless, always the first to try something new, with a particular fascination for Tucker's hat, which she would grab whenever he set it down. Tucker found himself falling more deeply in love with Annabelle each day. The arrangement that had begun as protection had blossomed into a true marriage, complete in every sense. Their nights together were tender and passionate, making up for the months of restraint with an enthusiasm that sometimes left them both breathless and laughing. Martha's visit in July brought a week of happy chaos to the ranch. Her children ages 8, 6, and 4 were enchanted with their baby cousins and eager to show them everything. Martha herself took to Annabelle immediately, pulling her into long conversations about family, ranching life, and the challenges of raising children on the frontier. "You've done my brother a world of good," Martha told Annabelle one afternoon as they watched Tucker teaching the older children how to brush the horses. "I haven't seen him this happy since before the war." Annabelle smiled, bouncing Emma on her hip. "He's done the same for me, for us." She nodded toward the twins. "I don't know what would have happened to us if he hadn't found us that day." Martha squeezed Annabelle's hand. "That's how it works out here. The right people find each other when they need it most." As summer turned to fall, their happiness was marred by only one shadow: the ongoing threat of Victor Holloway. Though they had heard nothing of him since the wanted notice Tucker had found months ago, Annabelle still startled at unexpected sounds and kept the twins close whenever they ventured into town. Tucker did his best to reassure her, pointing out that legally, she was now his wife and the twins were officially his children. Holloway would have no standing to challenge that, especially not in a frontier territory where records were sparse and local testimony carried more weight than distant claims. Still, they remained cautious, especially when strangers passed through the area. Tucker made sure everyone in Fort Benton knew Annabelle, as his wife who had joined him from back east with their twins, a story now so established that few remembered a time when the Northrops weren't a family. It was in October, as they prepared for the twins' first birthday, that the past finally caught up with them. Tucker had ridden into town for supplies, and a special gift for the twins' wooden pull toys he'd ordered months ago from a craftsman in Helena. Annabelle was at home with the twins, baking a small cake with precious sugar she'd been saving for the occasion. The sound of approaching horses made her pause in her work. Tucker wasn't due back for hours, and they rarely had visitors this far from town. Cautiously, she moved to the window, her heart nearly stopping at the sight of 3 men on horseback approaching the cabin. She didn't recognize 2 of them, but the third, a tall man with silver-streaked dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard, was unmistakable. Victor Holloway had found them. With trembling hands, Annabelle gathered the twins from their play area on the floor and hurried them into the bedroom. "Be very quiet," she whispered, though they were too young to understand. She placed them in their cradle with their favorite toys, hoping they would remain distracted and silent. Then she grabbed Tucker's shotgun from above the door. He had taught her to use it months ago, just in case, and positioned herself behind the solid oak table, the weapon aimed at the door. A heavy knock made her jump. "Annabelle," Holloway's voice called, smooth as silk and just as cold. "I know you're in there. Open the door, we have matters to discuss." She remained silent, her fingers steady on the trigger. "Don't be difficult," he continued. "I've come to bring you home. These past months of rebellion have been amusing, but it's time to end this charade." "This is my home," Annabelle called back, her voice stronger than she felt. "And I'm not going anywhere with you." A pause then. "I see. Well, that's unfortunate. Perhaps you'll change your mind when you consider what might happen to those precious twins if you continue to be stubborn. Or to this rancher you've been living with." Cold fear washed over her. "If you harm any of them, I swear to God I'll kill you myself, Victor." His laugh was like ice. "Still spirited, I see. Very well, we'll do this the hard way." She heard murmured instructions, then the sound of boots on the porch steps. The door handle turned locked, thankfully, then a shoulder slammed against the wood. The door shuddered but held. Annabelle steadied the shotgun, her heart pounding. She had 6 shells and there were 3 men. The odds weren't in her favor if it came to a shootout, but she would die before she let Holloway take her children. Another slam against the door, and this time she heard the wood begin to splinter. One more hit would likely break it open. Annabelle took a deep breath, prepared to fire as soon as she had a clear shot. Then came the sound that filled her with both relief and terror, hoofbeats approaching at a gallop. Tucker was back early. "What the hell is going on here?" Tucker's voice rang out, fierce with protective rage. "Get away from my house." Annabelle couldn't see what was happening outside, but she heard the shuffle of feet, the clink of metal, likely guns being drawn. "Mr. Northrop, I presume?" came Holloway's smooth voice. "I'm Victor Holloway. I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Nothing here belongs to you," Tucker replied, his tone deadly calm. "Annabelle is my wife and those children are mine. I have the marriage certificate and birth records to prove it." "Forged documents, no doubt," Holloway dismissed. "Annabelle O'Connor is my stepdaughter and ward. Those children are the orphaned offspring of her deceased sister, entrusted to my care. She stole them and ran away, a crime for which she will face consequences." "Her name is Annabelle Northrop," Tucker corrected, "and she's not going anywhere with you, neither are the twins." The tension in the air was palpable even through the cabin walls. Annabelle's hands were steady on the shotgun, but her heart raced with fear, not for herself, but for Tucker, outnumbered and facing 3 armed men. "I had hoped to resolve this civilly," Holloway said, his voice hardening. "But I see you're as stubborn as she is. Very well. My men will take what's mine, and you, Mr. Northrop, will not interfere if you value your life." What happened next unfolded in seconds that felt like hours. Annabelle heard shuffling, then a shout, followed by the unmistakable sound of fists connecting with flesh. A gunshot rang out, then another. A woman's scream pierced the air, and Annabelle realized it was her own voice. Unable to bear not knowing what was happening to Tucker, she moved to the window, keeping the shotgun trained on the door. The scene outside made her blood run cold. Tucker was on the ground, blood staining his shirt, while Holloway stood over him with a smoking pistol. The 2 henchmen were moving toward the cabin door, which still hadn't fully given way to their earlier attempts to break it down. Without hesitation, Annabelle aimed the shotgun through the window and fired. The blast shattered the glass and caught one of the men in the shoulder, spinning him around with a howl of pain. Before the other could react, she pumped the shotgun and fired again, missing him but splintering the porch post inches from his head. "The next one goes between your eyes," she shouted. "Get away from my husband," the uninjured man froze, then slowly backed away. Holloway, however, merely turned toward the window, his expression one of cold amusement. "There's the fire I always admired in you, Annabelle," he called, "but you're outnumbered and outmatched. Put down the gun before someone you care about gets hurt worse than they already are." Her eyes darted to Tucker, who was struggling to sit up, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. Their gazes met, and despite his pain, he gave her a small nod. A signal. In one fluid motion, Tucker drew the small revolver he kept in his boot, a holdover from his war days, and fired. The bullet caught Holloway in the thigh, dropping him to one knee with a cry of surprise and rage. The momentary distraction was all Annabelle needed. She fired again, this time striking the porch floor directly in front of the second henchman, who decided he wasn't being paid enough to die for Victor Holloway. He turned and ran, leaving his injured companion and their employer behind. Holloway, clutching his bleeding leg, glared at Tucker with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I'll see you both hang for this." Tucker, now on his feet despite his wound, leveled his revolver at Holloway's head. "No, it is over. You're going to get on your horse and ride away. You're never going to come near my wife or my children again. If you do, I won't aim for your leg next time." "You can't threaten me," Holloway spat. "Do you have any idea who I am, what power I have?" "I don't care if you're the president himself," Tucker replied evenly. "Out here, you're just a man bleeding in my yard threatening my family. That makes you nothing to me." A tense silence followed, broken only by the whimpers of the injured henchman and the distant sound of the twins beginning to cry, disturbed by the gunfire. Finally, Holloway spoke, his voice tight with pain and fury. "This won't stand, Northrop. I have friends in the territorial government, judges who owe me favors. You think your hastily arranged marriage and forged documents will protect her? Think again." "Those documents aren't forged," came a new voice. All eyes turned to see Sheriff Donovan from Fort Benton approaching on horseback, rifle in hand. "I witnessed the marriage myself. Signed the certificate along with Reverend Johnson and the county clerk." Relief washed over Annabelle. The sheriff must have seen Holloway and his men riding toward the Northrop ranch and followed out of suspicion or curiosity. Either way, his arrival couldn't have been better timed. "Sheriff," Holloway began, attempting to regain his composure despite his bleeding leg. "These people have assaulted me and my men. I demand their arrest. The woman is my stepdaughter, mentally unstable, and save it, Holloway," the sheriff interrupted. "I know who you are. Got a telegram about you from the sheriff in Helena just last week. Seems you've been making quite a nuisance of yourself, harassing folks with false claims about a missing woman and children." Holloway paled slightly. "Those claims aren't false. She misses. Northrop here has been a respected member of our community for months now," Sheriff Donovan continued as if Holloway hadn't spoken. "Her husband's family has ranched in this territory for years. Now, from what I can see, you're trespassing on their property and have fired upon Mr. Northrop without provocation." "He shot me," Holloway protested, gesturing to his bleeding thigh. "After you shot him first, from the looks of it," the sheriff observed dryly. "And after you tried to break into their home. That's attempted murder and breaking and entering where I come from." Tucker, still holding his side where the bullet had grazed him, moved to stand beside Annabelle, who had stepped onto the porch with the shotgun still ready. "What happens now, Sheriff?" he asked. Sheriff Donovan dismounted and approached Holloway, handcuffs at the ready. "Now Mr. Holloway and his friend here are going to jail in Fort Benton until the circuit judge comes through next month. Then they'll answer for attempted murder, breaking and entering, and whatever else the judge sees fit to charge them with." As the sheriff secured Holloway, the businessman made one final desperate attempt. "You're making a terrible mistake," he hissed. "I have connections, powerful friends who will make you regret this." "Maybe so," Sheriff Donovan acknowledged, tightening the handcuffs. "But right now, you're just a man who shot an unarmed rancher on his own property. Your connections can take that up with the territorial governor if they like." With the help of Tucker and a reluctant Holloway's remaining henchmen, the sheriff loaded the wounded men onto their horses. Before departing, he turned to the Northrops. "You two all right? That wound needs tending, Tucker." "We'll manage," Tucker assured him, his arm around Annabelle's waist. "Thank you, Sheriff." "Don't thank me yet," Donovan warned. Holloway wasn't lying about having connections. This might not be the end of your troubles. "Maybe not," Annabelle agreed, "but it's a start, and we've faced worse." After the sheriff had departed with his prisoners, Tucker and Annabelle returned to the cabin. The twins were crying in earnest now, frightened by the commotion. Annabelle gathered them up while Tucker collapsed into a chair, the adrenaline fading and the pain of his wound intensifying. "Let me tend to that," Annabelle said, setting the twins on their play blanket with their favorite toys. She dampened a cloth and began carefully cleaning the bullet graze on Tucker's side. It wasn't deep, but it was bleeding steadily. "I was so afraid," she admitted, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. "When I heard the gunshot and saw you on the ground." Tucker covered her hand with his. "It takes more than Victor Holloway to keep me from you and the twins." Tears filled Annabelle's eyes. "When I think of how close we came to losing everything." "But we didn't," Tucker reminded her gently. "We're still here, all of us." Once his wound was cleaned and bandaged, Tucker gathered Annabelle and the twins in a careful embrace. They sat like that for a long while, the four of them tangled together in a knot of family that had been tested and had held strong. That night, after the twins were finally asleep, exhausted from the day's excitement, Tucker and Annabelle lay in bed, wrapped in each other's arms. "Do you think it's really over?" Annabelle whispered into the darkness. "With Victor, I mean." Tucker considered the question seriously. "I think with him in jail facing serious charges and the sheriff aware of the situation, we're safer than we've been since you arrived. But no, I don't think it's entirely over. What will we do if he comes back, or sends others?" "We'll face it together," Tucker said simply. "Just like we did today, and in the meantime, we'll live our lives and raise our family and not let fear of him steal another day from us." Annabelle nestled closer, her head on his chest. "Our family," she repeated softly. "I like the sound of that. So do I." Tucker pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You know, when I found you and the twins that day, freezing in the snow, I never imagined how completely you would change my life." "For the better, I hope," Annabelle murmured, her voice growing sleepy. "In every possible way," Tucker assured her. "You gave me a family when I thought I'd always be alone. You gave me love when I'd forgotten what it felt like. You saved us," Annabelle countered. "Without you, I don't know if we would have survived that night, let alone everything that came after. Then I guess we saved each other." In the months that followed, life at the Northrop Ranch settled back into its rhythm. The twins celebrated their first birthday with the small cake Annabelle had been baking when Holloway arrived, though the celebration was delayed by a few days. They took their first steps within days of each other, Emma leading the way as usual, with Ethan quickly following his sister's example. Victor Holloway was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 5 years in the territorial prison. His political connections couldn't overcome the testimony of Sheriff Donovan and the evidence of Tucker's wound. Before being led away, Holloway had sworn revenge, but his threats seemed hollow now, stripped of his freedom and much of his influence. As winter approached once more, Annabelle discovered she was expecting their first child together. The news filled Tucker with a joy he could barely contain, prompting him to begin work on expanding their small cabin to accommodate their growing family. "I never thought I'd have all this," he confessed one evening as they sat by the fire, watching the twins play with blocks on the rug. Annabelle's hand rested on her still flat stomach, a secret promise of future joy. "A wife, children, a real family. Neither did I," Annabelle admitted. "Especially not after everything with Victor. I thought I'd spend my life running and looking over my shoulder, just trying to keep the twins safe." Tucker covered her hand with his. "You don't have to run anymore. This is where you belong, where we all belong." As if to emphasize his point, Ethan toddled over and pulled himself up using Tucker's knee, offering him a slightly drooly wooden block. Emma, not to be outdone, followed with her own gift, a small rag doll that she pressed into Annabelle's free hand with solemn ceremony. "Thank you, my darlings," Annabelle said, her eyes bright with unshed tears of happiness. That night, as snow began to fall outside their window, just as it had been falling the night Tucker found Annabelle and the twins, they lay together in the warmth of their bed, planning the future they would build together. You ever think about how differently things might have turned out? Annabelle asked sleepily. If you hadn't ridden down that particular trail at that particular moment, Tucker pulled her closer, his hand resting protectively over the spot where their child grew. I try not to dwell on might-have-beens, he said. But I thank God every day that I found you when I did. So do I, Annabelle murmured, already drifting toward sleep. So do I. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the landscape in a pristine blanket of white, much as it had that fateful night 2 years ago. Inside, the family that fate had brought together slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they had found in each other exactly what they needed: safety, purpose, and most importantly, love. When spring arrived, bringing with it wildflowers and the birth of new calves, it also brought the arrival of Tucker and Annabelle's baby, a strong, healthy boy they named James, after Tucker's father. The twins, now nearly 18 months old, were fascinated by their little brother, though Emma was initially disappointed that he couldn't play with her right away. Soon, Annabelle promised, guiding Emma's small hand to gently touch the baby's cheek. Before you know it, he'll be running after you too. As their family grew, so did the ranch. Tucker added 2 rooms to the cabin and hired a hand to help with the expanding herd of cattle. Annabelle started a small school for the twins and the children of nearby ranchers, fulfilling her dream of teaching while raising her family. Victor Holloway remained in prison, his influence gradually waning as his business interests suffered in his absence. Occasionally, they would hear rumors that he still spoke of revenge, but as the years passed, those threats seemed increasingly empty. On the 5th anniversary of the night Tucker found Annabelle and the twins in the snow, they hosted a celebration for friends and neighbors, a Thanksgiving of sorts for the family they had become. The twins, now 5 and full of energy, ran wild with the other children. 3-year-old James toddled after them, determined to keep up with his older siblings. And in Annabelle's arms was their newest addition, 2-month-old Sarah, named for Annabelle's mother. As twilight fell and their guests departed, Tucker and Annabelle stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as the first stars appeared in the lavender sky. "Did you ever imagine this?" Annabelle asked, leaning against Tucker's solid warmth. "That night when you found us half frozen in the snow?" Tucker's arm tightened around her waist as he gazed out at their thriving ranch, their 4 beautiful children, and the life they had built together. "No," he admitted with a smile. "This is better than anything I could have imagined." And it was. The family that had begun as a desperate rescue on a snowy night had become something precious and unbreakable, a testament to courage, compassion, and the enduring power of love found in the most unexpected circumstances.